Hey guys, welcome back to Life with Steph and to the first video of 2020. I hope you guys had good holidays, good Christmas, good New Year's, and hopefully this is a good year for you guys. Hopefully it's a good year for this channel. I'm super excited, and I think this year we're going to continue moving forward with a lot of the true crime cases, crime bongs, just talking about true crime, whatever it may be. It's just something that I really enjoy, and it seems, that a lot of people enjoy. So we're definitely gonna continue moving forward with that. With that being said, today we're going to be talking about the 1991 yogurt shop murder. So on December 6th, 1991, there was a yogurt shop which was called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. And this shop actually got robbed and set on fire. Before midnight, somebody actually noticed like the smoke, the fire, the flames. They noticed it and then they called it in. So of course the fire department reacted quickly, showed up, water going everywhere, put out the fire because they were expecting just a fire, and that's what they were trying to put out. Once the fire is extinguished, they come to find out that there were actually 4 bodies in the shop. There were 4 bodies towards the back of the shop. So along with, the fire damaging the bodies, and then also like the fire and then the water, it just ruined so much of the evidence that they could have used to figure out who did this. So there were a couple different factors, the fire, the water, and then also back then, as far as their forensic units went, they really only had like a fingerprint unit, and their division, their homicide division, was actually really small. Only one homicide cop was on the scene that night. So overall, this whole scenario just was not working in their favor whatsoever. So our victims that are found in the shop, we have 13-year-old Amy Ayers, 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison, and 17-year-old Eliza Thomas. So obviously we have Sarah and Jennifer. They were actually sisters. And Jennifer and Eliza were actually employees at the yogurt shop. They worked there together. And the other 2 girls had joined them there because they were going to have a sleepover that night. So they were going to wait for the 2 other girls to finish with their shift, and then all 4 of them were just going to ride together to the house that they were going to have a sleepover to. So sad. These 13, 15, 17-year-old girls had, a fun girls' night planned, and some people just decided to ruin that for them. It's so sad. So they were actually all friends. They had met because they were all members of the FFA, which is Future Farmers of America. So they had all met there and became friends, and they were just very happy with being a part of it. And they even found like home videos or pictures or whatever it may be of all of the girls, and they would be out, if they were doing an outing or wherever they were just, you could see how happy they were doing what they were doing as part of the FFA. Like I mentioned, all 4 of the girls were found towards the back of the shop. A couple of them were actually found stacked on top of the other, and then the other 2 close by, but all towards the back. They were all undressed, bound, and gagged with their own clothes. Each of the girls was also shot in the head, so more than likely they had all passed before the fire started. So John Jones was the detective that headed the case. He was a detective that was in charge of the case. And he actually immediately requested help from other departments like the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the FBI, and the Texas Department of Public Safety. And so they began the investigation like they normally would, you know, from the beginning, trying to find what they could, even though it was apparent that a lot of the evidence had been burned or damaged or washed away with the water. I'd speak to the customers that had been in that night, trying to see if they had maybe seen something. And they spoke to other employees that worked there, acquaintances of the girls, and they actually started receiving thousands of tips concerning this crime. So they did the best that they could to pursue each tip. That night, though, they did come to find out that there was a couple there, and they actually noticed 2 men sitting in a booth as the girls were cleaning. So it was already kind of later in the night, and the girls are already cleaning up, and this couple notices these other 2 men just kind of like chilling there. And the woman actually even claimed that she got a very uncomfortable feeling or vibe from these men. And when the couple left, the 2 men were still in the shop. So this statement was also supported by another witness. We have Darryl Croft. He also stated that there was, you know, something off that night. On 10 p.m., he walked into the yogurt shop and got in line, and in front of him was a guy acting really weird. Even asked Croft if he was a policeman, which Croft responded to that he wasn't, and he tried insisting for Croft to go before him in the line, and he declined. So he just kind of waited in line. When this gentleman got to the front of the counter, all he ordered was a soda pop, and then once he was done, he went around the corner and towards the back of the store. So Croft, having a really uneasy feeling to begin with, he goes up to the counter, orders his yogurts. He ordered yogurts for like himself and some of his friends. Walks up to the counter, orders his yogurts, and he does ask Eliza what, you know, like what happened, where that guy went. And Eliza states that she had given him permission to go use the restroom. So Croft, you know, doesn't really push it. He gets his yogurt, but he actually continues to hang out around the counter for a little bit longer, just a few more minutes, and he's hoping that the man will walk out from the back before he leaves, but he doesn't. So he leaves because his yogurts are melting, even though he has an uneasy feeling about this weirdo going to the bathroom when the store is being run by 2 young girls who have their other 2 young friends that are also girls there. What? Like, this is one thing that just So I know I've normally stuck to like just the facts, you know, but this just made me so mad. Like, you have this couple who sees these two men just sitting there being really shady, and this is just a store being run by two young girls, and you leave. You just leave these two girls there by themselves, and then you're a grown-ass man who is having a weird feeling about this creep, and then you leave because your yogurts are melting. Like, I want to know how these people feel knowing that had they maybe not left or said something or hung around the store, even outside, I'd rather look like a creep knowing that I'm like trying to watch out for these girls because I have an uneasy feeling than leave because my yogurts are getting melted. But that's just me. So one thing at least that he did do correctly is he was actually able to give police a detailed report sketch of the man that, you know, was being a creepo. So he did at least do that. Even though, so they have this sketch of this guy, and they actually ended up doing several lineups, but they never found this guy. This guy that this being a super creepo, never found him. And then that was kind of, you know, moved on from, because 8 days later, we have 16-year-old Maurice Pierce. He was actually picked up and questioned. So when he was picked up, he was carrying a .22 caliber handgun, which at that time he actually claimed that he had lent his gun to his 15-year-old friend, Forrest Wellborn, and then he claimed that Forrest had actually been the one to commit the murders. So Pierce is arrested with the handgun, turns it on Wellborn. Wellborn is brought in, and he denies everything. He denies that he murdered anybody. He did, however, admit to having a little bit of a joyride adventure. And so during this joyride, he was accompanied by Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen. So because of this, that's how these two fall on the police's radar. They end up questioning all of the boys. Jones feels very confident that neither Pierce nor Wellborn had anything to do with the murders. So they pretty much dismiss that. So although it was confirmed that the girls were shot with a .22, the ballistics confirmed that it was not actually Pierce's gun that was used. And even though they did end up testing multiple guns as well, the gun that was used that night was not found. So the guy that they sit there and try to find in lineups isn't found. The gun that they keep testing for isn't found. So in 1994, Jones actually got promoted and transferred. And at this point, the investigation had gone cold. Like, it still, like, it wasn't, you know, completely left behind, but it was just, it wasn't really going anywhere. And it wasn't until 1996 that it was kind of picked up and looked at again. And so we have Detective Paul Johnson. He's the one that decided to, let's look at this case again. And so Johnson tried to rework the case, try to approach it from a different point of view, but still, at the end of it, the one that fell at the top of the list as a suspect was Pierce himself and his .22. But it's not very clear how he came to that conclusion of Pierce being a suspect, or of how his gun is the gun that committed this crime, even though it was already ruled out by ballistics. No one's really sure. And they also, like from articles that I read and stuff, after Paul Johnson retired, he wasn't really able to be reached to, respond to questions or anything. So no one really knows. So we do have a couple different parties that disagree with Johnson's findings. So one of them is John Jones, the original detective, and then we also have Joe James Sawyer. Joe James Sawyer stated, "There is an assumption in cold case reviews that they missed the truth the first time out, and that is fatal. That is the most imbecilic way to approach an old crime. Because the proper way to reapproach it is to say, what might we have missed? What didn't we see? Instead of being convinced that in the first investigation, you simply missed the bad guy, and that you had him all along." And Jones agreed, and then he stated, "Paul started from the premise that we screwed it up. That's what happens when you come up with a conclusion, and then you go about building a case to that conclusion. Other than going about it the other way around, that's what happened in this case, really. I think that certain people come up with what they thought happened and then constructed a case around that theory." But still, in 1996, we have Pierce, Springsteen, Scott, and Wellborn. They were all actually arrested as suspects in this case all over again. And all over again, Wellborn and Pierce were released. So they were originally arrested in 1996. Wellborn's charges were dropped in 2000, and Pierce's charges were dropped in 2003. So aside from the beginning issues that we had of a fire and water and all that, there was actually other complications to this case. So one of the detectives on this case was actually fired for coercing confessions. And then there was also a relationship going on between Springsteen's father and a data processing employee for the Austin Police Department. So a couple of those things really tainted the investigation. But still, Springsteen and Scott were actually convicted for these murders. Not because they had any concrete evidence, but because of their own confessions. They actually ended up confessing to these crimes and then using each other's confessions to convict the other one, which, So, yeah, there was no concrete evidence. There was no DNA on the scene. DNA found on the girls' bodies didn't match either of them, but still, they were convicted. So in 2001 is when both Springsteen and Scott were convicted for these crimes. Now, Springsteen was actually he was sentenced to death. and Scott was sentenced to life in prison. Down the road, Springsteen's conviction was actually commuted to life, but then in 2006, both of their convictions were overturned, and the reason behind that was because their civil rights had been violated during their interrogations. So come October 28, 2009, all charges against both Springsteen and Scott were dropped. So it was back to square one, no suspects, nothing. And even now, to this day, it's still unknown who killed these girls, who robbed the store, who set fire. They still have no idea who it is. But despite all of that, the department still has hope that they might still solve it. And again, like previously mentioned, they're just hoping that somebody will approach this from a completely different point of view without any previous ties to the case, and that will look for things that they may have missed, instead of trying to build the case around what they believe happened. So they still do have hope that somebody will relook into this case again with a whole different view and hopefully find something that they missed. But still, here we are, 2020, and it is still an unsolved case. So I do want to give credit to Lisa. She actually brought this case to my attention. I honestly was super fascinated as soon as I started looking into it. I was super excited to look into it. So I do want to give her a big shout out for contributing that idea, and not only that, but just like the amazing support that I've gotten from her. So thank you so much, and thank you to all who watched this. If you have any other suggestions for videos, you can always let me know. Leave comments. Let me know what you think of this case. Have you heard of it before? Is it brand new to you? Do you think any of these other 4 guys did it? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. Be sure to give this video a like, subscribe, share, follow my social media. It's all linked down below, and I will see you guys on the next video. Bye.